I'm having a latte today. I usually have black coffee, but the girlfriend was like, latte, whatever. And I was like, yeah, go on then. It's actually really nice. Today, I want to talk to you about cinematic footage. Everyone's trying to get cinematic footage at the moment. And there's a lot of easy things that a lot of beginners don't really know about how to get that cinematic footage. So I thought I'd share some tips and tricks on how to make your footage look cinematic, because I wish someone had told me this when I started out. Right, so before you even get your footage and you put it into the timeline, you need to record it. Now, what are the best settings for cinematic footage? 24 FPS is a must. It's actually something like 23.95 something, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to call it 24 frames a second. Now, the reason 24 frames per second looks so cinematic is just the way our eyes are trained. We can see a massive difference between 24 and 60. I mean, you can do it on YouTube. If you watch a 30 frames a second video on YouTube and you watch a 60 frames a second video on YouTube, you can see that there are more frames and the motion's a lot more fluid. However, at the cinema, we watch films in 24 frames a second. So our brain has got used to that being the frame rate of cinematic footage. So when we see 24 frames a second film, we instantly think, that's really cinematic. That looks really nice. And it's kind of just a way that our brains have been wired. So shooting at 24 is a great way to get cinematic footage. Secondly, what color profile are you shooting in? Most cameras come out the box with a very oversaturated, very vivid color profile. But if you go into the settings on your camera, there'll be different profiles, different color profiles, and each one of them is going to look different. Now, I shoot in S-Log, I shoot on Sony, I've got a Sony a6500. Obviously with Canon, you'd be shooting in C-Log. And what log is, it's a color profile that mutes all the colors and brings down all the contrast. So it gives you lots of room to play about with the colors and the contrast and the look of your footage. It's almost like shooting at grayscale, and then you are adding that saturation, those colors in afterwards. So why do we do this? We do this because it gives us much more control over the image. We're not just relying on the camera to give it this overly vivid image where all the colors pop, because sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you're filming some moody rain shots or something in some sort of thunderstorm, and you want those dark, unsaturated colors. Now, another thing that, to be honest, I didn't learn this for a good year, 2 years of picking up a camera, which I wish I knew, is your shutter speed. Now, your shutter speed should be double your frame rate. Obviously, most cameras don't have a 1/48 frame rate. That's just how they work. So we put it to 1/50. Shooting double your frame rate is a rule that lots and lots of filmmakers do. And it makes that footage look a lot more cinematic. And then lastly, make sure all your settings are right. You don't want anything overexposed, you don't want anything underexposed. Most cameras will have something that tells you if something is overexposed or underexposed. But once again, you can intentionally underexpose stuff and you can intentionally overexpose stuff. It depends on what you're going for. But in most cases, just make sure your exposure's right. Lattes are really underrated. So, you've got all your footage and you think it looks great, it looks brilliant inside of camera. It's now time to put it into Premiere Pro and start making it look even better. So, we're going to open Premiere Pro. We're going to open a sequence that's in the same frame rate as the footage you've shot, so 24 frames a second. Now, I'm going to grab some gimbal footage that I shot a while ago with Dan Moss Productions. Go check him out, he's great. So I'm going to import my clip. Now, this clip was shot on a gimbal. That's another way you can get kind of a more cinematic, smooth look, but handheld camera is also a style choice. It just depends on what you want. So we've got the video on our timeline. This was shot in S-Log using Dan's A6400. So same series of camera as mine, same sensor. And there's a couple of things we can do to start off with. One of the easiest ways to color grade our footage is using something called a LUT. Now, a LUT stands for lookup table, and it's almost like a filter for your video. Now, there's a couple of ways we can get LUTs. We can either make our own LUTs or we can download them from the internet. LUTs are great because you can get your footage looking very cinematic with very minimal effort. But you've got to find the right LUT for the job. So for instance, if I go to look here in the creative tab, So what I will do is it will open a folder and you will go to where your LUTs are kept. For me, that is downloads because I'm a moron. And then you can open the LUT pack. Now, you need to pick the right LUT here. So if I picked, I don't know, Joker LUT. So this is a LUT from the film Joker that someone has made and put into the internet. Obviously, this isn't the look at all I want for this. You can turn on the intensity, however, and you can mess about with every single setting on it to make it. I don't tend to use LUTs that often. I will do if I find a really good LUT. The only time I'll use LUTs is if I'm filming a video that all kind of looks the same, and it just saves time in the edit, not having to color grade every single shot. Now, what I like to do is I like to add an adjustment layer first. Now, an adjustment layer is a layer on top of the footage that affects the footage below it. Now, I like to do this instead of just color grading the footage itself, because I feel like you get a better look when you're using adjustment layers, as you can layer them on top of each other and change things individually. So how do you get an adjustment layer? What you need to do is you need to go down to this project tab at the bottom with all your footage in. You want to go to the icon here that says new item, click, and then go to, where is it? Adjustment layer. There you go. Now it will show you the settings of the adjustment layer. We obviously want it in 1080p at 23.976 frames a second, which is what we filmed in. And if we hit OK, we can then put the adjustment layer on the top. And then whatever we do to the adjustment layer, it will do to the footage underneath. So for instance, if we up the exposure and then hide the adjustment layer, as you can see, it's only affected the adjustment layer. Now this is great because it means that if you make a mistake, you're not messing up the actual footage. You can go very, very deep into color correction. And if you're there for hours and hours and hours color correcting things onto the footage, then if you mess up, it's a lot harder to fix it. So what I like to do with the first adjustment layer is I like to make the image a lot less flat. So how I do that is I usually bring up the contrast, up the highlights slightly, and bring down those shadows. Now, as you can see, the image has become a lot more flat. We've got a bit more depth into the image. I then usually go down to the curves and I mess about with the RGB curves just to try and get a little bit more depth in, pulling those highlights out and bringing that background down a little bit to give it this moody kind of green look. I want to go almost for this kind of moody green, almost horror look. The forest is a bit moody, to be honest. So this is the correction we've done. We've added a bit of depth to it, maybe added a little bit too much contrast, but I quite like the way it looks. Well, what I like to do then is I like to grab another adjustment layer. Now we come down to the HSL tab, which stands for Hue, Saturation and Luminosity. Lumen? The L stands for something. It doesn't matter as long as you know what it does. So what you can do here is you can grab the pipette tool and you can click on a color that you want to do stuff with. Come down to contrast, texture, tint. And what I want to do is I want to select all of the leaves like so. And I want to bring the temperature to be a bit more green, a bit brighter on the leaves there. There we go. I like that. So what we've done there is we've just changed those colour of the leaves to give them a more rich kind of green colour. Then what I like to do is I like to go and sort out the skin tones, because right now my skin tone is very white. Bring that skin tone more towards the orange, maybe higher the saturation on the skin tone a little bit. Maybe bring that down, that's far too orange. And then we've got a bit more of a human looking person. Then what I tend to do is I add another adjustment layer, drag that along. And on this adjustment layer, I like to go to the color wheel and match section. Now we don't need to worry about the match section, we just need to worry about the color wheel. In the color wheel, you can change the midtones, the highlights and the shadows. With these circles here, you can change where you want the colors of the midtones, shadows and highlights to go. Now I want the midtones to be kind of a bit bluish. I want those blues to come through, that give it that cold look. I then like to move the highlights up just to a little bit of purple, just to bring a bit more life back into the skin. Over to the red, kind of the reddy purple kind of area, just gives the skin a bit more life, because right now we're just not looking human. The shadows, we want to bring them I want to bring it up. I'm liking it just slightly up to the purple. And then we can hide the adjustment layer and see what we've done. So we've color graded it to kind of a more purpley green. So we've still got the green in the leaves, but we've got a bit more of a purple kind of tone to it now. And this is what we've ended up with. Now that I've watched it through, I think that the shadows are a bit purple. So I'm going to put the shadows back to where they were and maybe bring them more over to, you know what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm going to leave the shadows, go back to basic correction, and then just use the basic tool to make the shot slightly less purple. And now that's what we've got. Brilliant, that looks great. So, just to remind us where we've come from, we started with this kind of look. Very washed out, not very saturated, no colours. We then upped the contrast, lowered the shadows, upped the highlights to give it a bit more contrast and a bit more depth. We then messed about with the colours to get those leaves just a little bit more green. And then finally, we changed the highlights to more of a purpley red to get that skin tone back and to give it more of kind of a mystical look, to get rid of all that green that was already on it. Now you might be thinking, I'm missing one big thing. And this is what a lot of people do straight away when you hear cinematic footage, and it's black bars. Black bars at the top and the bottom of the footage. Now, if you want those black bars on the top and the bottom of your video, those cinematic black bars, a good way is to export it into the right aspect ratio. There is another way to get these cinematic black bars if you're not going to export it in 16:9. Say you're doing a sit-down video like this, you don't want black bars on the top and the bottom of the screen, but you have a B-roll sequence and you really want those black bars on the top and the bottom. There's a simple way to do that. Just download a PNG of some black bars. So what we'll do is on the computer is we'll drag in this PNG that we've downloaded and put it on top of all the adjustment layers. It's really important you put it on top of the adjustment layers because obviously if you put them under, the color grade is going to affect the black bars and the black isn't going to be black. It's going to be affected by the color grade you've done. And then we'll just lower the scale on them and get them to fit the screen. And there we go. We have got a cinematic clip that looks like it could be in a film. Probably not though. And that's basically it on the video side of it. Make sure your camera's in 24 FPS, you're shooting in log, and the shutter speed is double your frame rate. Then put it into After Effects, mess about with the colours. It's going to be different for every bit of footage, obviously. Maybe throw a LUT on there and get those cinematic black bars. That's kind of it, really. Obviously, this was quite in-depth, and this is how I do it personally. There's probably a lot of things I do wrong. My colour grading's probably way off most people's, and I wouldn't say I'm the best at colour grading. But even then, I've managed to get what I would say is quite a good cinematic look on my footage. And I think that's it really. You know now what to do to get cinematic footage on all of your videos. First video, done. That took far too long to record. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful to you. This is kind of the first tutorial I've ever tried to make, so if it's all over the place and rambly, please just let me know because I need to get better at this, really. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace out? No, that's weird.